Okay, so, oops, let's start. So last time we discussed a lot of very, very basic things, which you can do with Python, and there are, even within these basic toolkits, there are many things you can do. So today, my goal is to move a little bit further and besides basic arithmetics and variables and strings in Boolean type and if and else conditions, if and else statements, we'll go to lists and loops and maybe a little bit even further than that. So the first thing, well, many programming languages use arrays, right? So in C++, you probably used arrays. Did you? Any recollection? I forgot. You all took the C++ course, right? Okay. So what is an array? Any recollection?
Array is just like where you can store like a bunch of different variables.
Mm-hmm. And they're also, well, typically it's a set of variables and typically of the same type. And they're numbered, and you allocate memory for an array. You say, okay, I have an array of 100 elements, and I'm gonna and they're gonna be of integer type. So Python use lists. Lists are similar to arrays, but they're not exactly arrays. So they do not, first of all, you don't specify the length. Second, you don't need to worry about the type. That's quite often about Python in general. So let me give you an example. All right, I introduce in a variable, and I ask you to repeat what I'm typing as well. So then I use the square brackets, and in the square brackets I have A, B, C, and D. So if I type just my list, it will give it, well, it uses single quotation marks, although I use double quotation marks here because they're interchangeable. They mean the same thing. Let me make my font a little bit larger. Okay, so I have this list of objects. Each object is a character A, B, C, D, right? Well, strictly speaking, it's each one is a string. And then there are several methods I can use, I can apply to lists. So first is len, which determines the length of the list. So how did I call it? I call it my list. So it returns the length of this list, so how many elements we have in the list. Then, well, I can print my list, so print my list. The function print will be printing it, well, similar to when I just entered it. Or I can print an element from a list, and if I want to print the first element, so what do I need to put here in the square brackets? You probably all know. Make a guess.
0.
Yes, it's 0, because similar to C++ and Python, we enumerate everything starting from 0. Okay, my list 0, and it gives me the first element of my list. All right, I can also print my last element, and again, it will be similarly to what you had with strings. Oops, with strings, I can do the -1, and it will give me the last element. Well, as I said, what it makes difference from arrays, you can easily change its length, and you can, in particular, you can append to a list. So my list has a function append, and if it is a function and not a method, it has an argument, and you can add a certain variable here. And in particular, I'd like to append E. I had A, B, C, D, so I decided I'm gonna append E letter. Okay, and let me print my list again. and it will be A, B, C, D, E. It just appended it to the end. The interesting thing is that I can append, if my list, note this, all the elements in my lists are string, but I can easily append an element which is a number. Let me say I'm appending, well, I said I'm going to append E, right? I can append 2.7, right? Do you happen to remember any more digits of the E of the base of the natural log? No? Oh, I thought in American schools they had mnemonics for everything. So in Russian school we had very rare mnemonics to remember things, but there was one for the E number. So we typically remember quite many digits in E number. You don't really need them, but if you start here, it goes with 1828, which is the year of birth of Leo Tolstoy, and presumably every Russian school kid knows when Leo Tolstoy was born. Have you guys read Leo Tolstoy? No, none of you. That's wow. What about Dostoevsky? No. Strongly suggest you. It's really they're the best. And I mean, I love American writers, and there are certainly some American writers which are, ranked in, I don't know, top 5 or top 10 writers ever. But I know that both Dostoevsky and Tolstoy are always at this top. Anyway, so I'm appending the letter E, and not letter E, but I'm appending 2.7, right? I wanted to append a number to my list, and if I print my list again, you see, in addition to all these elements it had before, we have this additional element, which is, unlike all the other elements which were strings, this one is a float. So it doesn't bother Python. In C++, it would be hard, but in Python, you can take a list and append to it whatever type you want, and so the lists are quite flexible. All right, so you can also change an element in the list. You don't need to append it. You can easily overwrite it. So you just do my list. And you give an element number. Let's say I take third element, and I say, instead of my third element, which is what? Which letter would be the third element? My list 3 would return what?
C.
Now it's going to return D. Yeah, because the index 3 it corresponds to the actual fourth element, right? So if I do my list 3, it's going to be D. So, and I can easily overwrite it and can put something like 3.14159. I don't have a mnemonic for this number, but I still remember a few digits. So, and if I just enter my list again, so it will give me A, B, C, and instead of D, it gives me the pi number, and then E, and then the E number. So the next thing you can do, you can also insert to a list. So my list, insert, and this is a function. Oops, sorry. This is again a function, so you need to give it arguments. So 2 would be the position at which you insert, and then what you insert. And let me insert, for example, this number. It's a float, but it's in scientific notation, right? And my list is now A, B, and after the second element, well, at the second element, if we have these Avogadro's number, and then C, and so on and so forth. So there are many things you can do with lists. you know, in terms of indexing, they're similar to strings, which we discussed last time, but of course they're much more flexible, because unlike strings where each element is a symbol, here each element could be whatever we want. And of course, lists are used much more broadly in Python than strings. Any questions so far? Okay, good. So similar to strings, we can check whether an element is in the list or not. So I can see E in my list. True, because E is in my list, right? Or I can say 2.7, 18, 28 in my list. Oh yeah, it's true again. If I ask if 2.7 is in my list, it says false because it doesn't know that, you know, we wanted to round it. Obviously, it takes this variable literally. All right, so also we can look at my list, and we want to find not just if something is in this list, but we want to see if this something is at a certain position. So I use the function index. My list index E gives me 5 because it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the 5th position we have E, so it returns the index of the E. So if I now do my list of 5, this is where the E element of my list is. I can also, again, this is a difference with arrays. I can delete elements from my list. So I can delete my list. Let's say at this position 5, all right? And if now I look at my list again, it will be A, B, C, A, B, Avogadro's number, C, and then E is missing because we deleted it. And also, we can remove the elements, my list, using the function myListRemove, and that would be, we can specify the element itself. So myListRemove C, removed my C number from this list. All right, there are many more things, and as I said, typically, if you need to look up something about Python functions, Python objects, and so on, you just Google for it. You just Google for Python lists, and I'm sure you'll find all the information. And you can also use the help function, which I rarely use. It's easier for me to type something in Google. All right. One more thing about lists, it's quite convenient to work with lists of numbers. So I can introduce a list using the function range. So range, you see when I ask it to give it to me, let me do, if I do print A, oh, it still types range. Okay, I can do A 0th, A first, A second, A third will give me an error. So the function range gives a range of integer numbers. So the range of 3 gives numbers 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 elements from 0 to 3 minus 1. So obviously, if you have range 100, it's going to be 100 numbers up to, A equals range 100. And now if I print my last element, A minus 1, it will be 99. So it's from 0 to 99. But it's more universal. In fact, you can do A equals range from 3. And by the way, you see, Spider gives me hints how to use which arguments to use from 3 to 15 with a step 2. So it's from 2 and with a step. So it will be all odd numbers from 3 to 15. And let me now print with a well, not including 15, of course. So print a 0. So a 0 is 3, a 1 is 5, the last one is 13, etc. So that's the range function which we will quite frequently use. All right. Next thing with the list. Any questions so far? Okay, good. Good. All right. So the next thing is sorting lists. So this list is obviously sorted, but let's take a different list. For example, courses, list of courses you take, right? And it will be, well, many of you taking my 342, and obviously all of you are taking my 491 independent study, but then probably you take 370 and 365, right? And print courses. So they're in quite an arbitrary sequence, but if I do courses and use the method sort, it will sort it. Okay, it will sort it in the order of in the increasing order. So same can be done with names, right? So if I use names, so with strings, if your list is a list of strings, so it will be let me do it's more complicated. Let it be Nana, who's unfortunately absent today, Jeff, Kim, Joe, right? And it's in a pretty arbitrary order, but if I do names sort and print names, it will be in the alphabetical order. And with there as I said, there are many things. Interestingly, you can do some math operations on your lists, but it's not, well, probably it's not, it will give you not what you expect. So if I have a list, let's let it be L equals 1, 2, 3, and N equals 4, 5, 6. Guess what's going to be L plus N? Huh?
579.
It will be the result of concatenation of these lists. So when you add in lists, you're not doing it because they're not mathematical objects. So you're not adding them element by element, right? Or what you're doing, you're adding this second list to the tail of the first list.
Yeah, I was thinking about it mathematically. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. And you can add what you can add L. You can add the list to itself. So no, not to itself, but you can add to an existing list, and then oops, and then now L is this entire thing, and so on. All right, so what's also quite important is to slice the lists. So if well, now L is this long list from 1 to 6, I can take certain elements from it. And remember, when I had this range, I was printing it element by element, but you can actually pick a bunch of elements by slicing the list. So for example, from 2 to 5. Oh, so that takes from the element number 2, which is the third element, right? Till the element number 5, so it's 4, 5, not well, it's not including the fifth element, so it's not including the number 6. Then you can slice it from the beginning to a certain point. So if you start from column and you say from L to 5, so it will start from the beginning and give you a part of your list starting at 1 and ending at 5. And then you can slice it till the end. For example, you're starting at your second element and go until the end, and then it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can even do it with counting indices from the end, right? So -1 is equivalent to 5. You're going to the element with a number 5 or the number -1. So the last element of the array of the list. However, keep in mind that yes, this last element is not included in slicing. All right, any questions? Okay, excellent. So we'll use lists. Well, with coding, it's always the same thing. When you start using something, you understand how it's working. Otherwise it's, well, unfortunately with many things it is like that. You can't really comprehend something before you start using it. So we'll be using list. You'll figure out how to use slicing, how to, well, append elements to a list, and so on. The next thing I'd like to discuss is loops. And let me give you an example. So loop does something for many times, and this is the power of programming, right? You don't want to do the same manipulations many times yourself. For example, you're doing some calculations in your Thermo 2, right? And often you need to repeat the same calculations for a number of different points. Let's say you have a PXY or a TXY diagram, and for each point along your concentration X, you're doing the same calculations. And what you would normally do, you would put these bunch of X's in your Excel spreadsheet and let Excel do it. And Excel is a very convenient tool. Alternatively, you can write your equation and you can call this equation in the loop many times, as many as you need. So the for, we'll start from the for loop, and let me give you an example. So you have these list names with your names which are sorted, right? So I can, in the loop, I can print each of the names. So for name in names, right? And this is the syntax of the for loop. You write for, and then you write the variable, and where this variable is varying, right? With the range where it's changing. For name and names, print name. All right, make sure it's working. Make sure you are repeating this. Or you don't, well, I use name as the name of a variable. It doesn't have to be named. Keep this in mind. It can be whatever you want. So I can type for x in names print x. As I told you last time, it's not good to use x as your name as a variable. The variable should be telling you what this variable means. So x doesn't mean anything since, you know, we have a list of names here. So this would be a little bit better. All right, you can do it using this range function, right? So for I in range 5, oops, well, instead of colon, I put semicolon, and that's why it complained. So print I. All right. So for each number I in range from 0 to 4, because range 5 gives you numbers from 0 to 4, it prints me the number itself, right? And then, well, you can do a little bit more advanced things. You can do for I in range 5, print the squares of these numbers. Oops, I need first to calculate the square and then to print it. Okay, so for each number you calculate the squares, right? And I can do it if I'd like to do it for 100, I can do it for 100 and it will be pretty fast, right? Okay, so that's why you need loops. Let's have well, slightly different examples. Okay, you have your names. Let's introduce also last names. Let's call it last names. And last names would be, all right, I will have to use the same order, right? Okay, Mancini. Oh, no, Jeff. We start from Jeff. Sorry. Okay, Chen, Mancini, Cow, and all right, so now we have last names. And now I'll do a loop which will greet each of you using your full names, all right? So for, first of all, I need to do a loop for each element in this array, but I will need to call not just the names, I will need to call both the names and the last names. So if I iterate over the names over the names in this list, it won't solve it. It won't help me. I need a little bit more. So I will introduce my variable I, or whatever, I student, the number of a student in this list, and I will use it. But I need to see what will be this range where this variable is going from and to. So in order to do that, I will first calculate the length of the array. So I will say my n students, so number of students, is the length of the array names. Well, hopefully it's the same as the length of the array of last names, right? So if I look at my n students, it's 4. And then I do for I student. So for each student in range n students. And then in this loop, I do print. And as I said, I wanted to greet you all, hello, and then plus names, and I need to use the element corresponding to these names. So names, I student, plus I want to add a space between your first name and the last name. plus L names I student. All right, and exclamation mark if I want to be super friendly, right? Hello, and this. All right, so this loop greets you all in the loop. Oh, and by the way, you know, with Python, we're not going to be studying it. This is not what typically chemical engineers use Python for, so we're not going to be discussing it. But you can easily write a loop in Python, which would, you know, send a bunch of emails through your address book, greeting each by name, and then send in a certain text, and you can send a mass spam email, personalized, nice spam email using a simple Python script with pretty much a single loop. All right, any questions so far? All right, then I actually, well, I want to give you an exercise, but before we start working on exercise, and I noticed that you guys already started writing. I just glanced at your homeworks. I didn't read it in details, but as far as I understand, you already started working on scripts. So I suggested you on IPython because it's very convenient to do something quick. When you need to write a single line of code or 2 lines of code, the IPython, this interface is terrific. However, if you want to write a script, a number of instructions to your Python, which will do something more or less considerable, you're not going to use an IPython because it's much more convenient to save your script and to reuse it in the future. And of course, while people save their scripts, they don't do it in IPython. They generate files and they write stuff in their files. This is just some random estimation of the diffusion coefficient, but I will now ask you guys to in your Spider to go to this left panel and to create a new file. And before you do something with it, save it. So you need to save it, and I don't know. I'll call it test. Well, what is it? Test 0, whatever. It's not a test, but I'm doing it for testing purposes. And you can type everything similar to what you were typing here in your IPython, and then you can save it and execute it and then change something and execute it again. So this is in fact the way we're going to be working with it. It's just I wanted first to show you these IPython console. All right. Let me give you an example. It will give you, if it will show us the output in the console, in fact. So if I do print, and I'll ask you to do the same, hello world, and then I click run, it ran this file and it gave me this hello world. All right, I could have copied this code here. So let me see. If I copy, I need first to introduce my names and L names. So L names. Uh-oh. I didn't realize. Oh, and these were my names. And then I can copy this last loop, which I wrote. I copied my loop, but if I try running it right now, it's going to give me an error. And by the way, you can see that put this exclamation mark here saying undefined name and student. So it helps you, it tells you that I forgot to say what and students is, and this is the length of names, right? And now I think it's gonna work. Okay, so now my script, which is saved as this test0 file, it goes in the loop through these two lists and add each element to a string and prints this string. So hello, and then greets you all by your names. All right. One more comment. Well, or maybe any questions? Oh, yeah, I'm glad. I don't know. If you're not asking questions, it means hopefully everything is transparent and not everything is unclear. But one more comment regarding Python scripts. So this is just a text file. Yes, I gave it the name ending with py, right? So it's a Python script. But in fact, it's simply a text file. And you can, even if you work with other programming languages, for example, C++ or I don't know, Java, whatever you want, or Fortran, right? The scientific community still uses Fortran quite broadly. So your codes are just plain text. The difference in your C++ or in your Fortran, you need to compile it to make a binary. If you're using Windows, it's going to be .eexe file. If you use Linux, the extension doesn't matter. But anyway, you will be executing your binary file. Here, it doesn't create a binary file. It executes your text file. Your Python script is a text file, which your Python interpreter goes and reads line by line and executes line by line. So, the reason I'm saying that is that you don't have to use Spider. In fact, you can use Notepad. You can use different tools similar to Notepad. When I used Windows, I used Notepad++. On Linux, I think I used Notepad++. There is a BBEdit editor, which I use on my Mac as well. So different text editors. You can use a default text editor, it's just not very convenient, but you can use anything you want to edit your Python script. All right. The one thing. Okay. One thing I need to introduce before I give you an exercise, and this is using an input from a user. Okay. So let me comment this out. So by the way, I don't remember the hotkeys here, but okay, it's but you can comment and uncomment an entire block of text. So I commented these 3 lines. You see they changed color. They won't be executed. So because I don't want to delete them, but I don't want to execute them at the same time. And I wanted to show you how to use the input from user. All right. So let's introduce a variable user name, and in order to get user's input, we use the function input. And let's say, what is your name? So the Python will be asking you, what's your name? You will be answering these questions, and then I would like Python to greet you, right? Print, hello, then plus username, all right, plus, and let's see, I saved this script and let me execute it. All right. So you see the script is asking me, what is your name? And I'm saying, Gennady. Oops, I can't spell my name. This is very bad. Gennady. And the script says, hello, Gennady, right? So if I execute it one more time and say, I don't know, my name is Jeff, it will say, hello, Jeff, all right? So this function input lets you get the input from a user. And the reason I gave you this function and all of the above, because the next exercise would be, and this is something I'd like you to start working right now, is to write a Python script which calculates a factorial of a number entered by user. So I can delete all that, okay? Or I can comment this out, which is a bad habit, leaving a lot of code here. So once again, I'll to write, well, Python script. And by the way, you see I'm writing a comment, so it shows gray and it won't be executed. So I can write whatever I want. So write a Python script which calculates a factorial of a number entered by the user. Okay, now let me proceed at this line. All right, I think at this point I can stop recording, and I will, although I might continue if I want to show the solution, but I want you guys to start working on that, and I will be giving you an opportunity to share a screen with me so that I can see how you're making progress. All right, I'll do pause.